Martha sat in the courtroom, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. The oak benches felt cold and impersonal, much like the process that had dragged on for 18 months. Boston's family court was imposing with its high ceilings and formal atmosphere, a place where families were torn apart or stitched back together with the strike of a gavel. Across the aisle, her ex-husband Richard sat confidently beside his attorney, a sleek woman in an expensive suit who had built her career crushing people like Martha. Next to Richard was his mother, Eleanor, her silver hair perfectly styled, her posture rigid with disapproval as she stared daggers at Martha. 5-year-old Ethan was waiting in another room with a court-appointed guardian. Martha's heart ached thinking about him, wondering if he was scared, if he understood what was happening today. "All rise," the bailiff called out as Judge Hamilton entered, a stern-looking woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. Martha stood, smoothing down her simple navy dress, the nicest thing she owned, purchased specifically for court appearances. She'd lost 20 pounds during this custody battle, stress eating away at her frame until her clothes hung loose. "Be seated," Judge Hamilton said, settling into her chair and reviewing the documents before her. "We're here for the final custody determination in the case of Winters versus Winters." Richard's attorney stood immediately. "Your Honor, we've submitted extensive documentation demonstrating that our client, Richard Winters, is the more suitable primary guardian for the minor child, Ethan Winters. Mr. Winters has a stable career as a financial advisor, earning in excess of $200,000 annually, owns a 4-bedroom home in a top-rated school district, and can provide the child with opportunities and advantages that Mrs. Winters simply cannot match." Martha felt her throat tighten. It was true. After their divorce, Richard had kept the house while she moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment. His income dwarfed her salary as a part-time bookkeeper and evening student finishing her teaching degree. Richard's attorney continued. "Furthermore, Mrs. Winters' schedule is erratic. She works during the day and attends classes 3 evenings a week. She relies heavily on childcare from neighbors and friends. Mr. Winters, by contrast, has a flexible work schedule, and his mother, Eleanor Winters, is available to assist with childcare when needed." Judge Hamilton nodded, making notes. "And Mrs. Winters' position?" Martha's attorney, a kind but overworked public defender, stood. "Your Honor, while my client's financial situation is indeed more modest, she has been Ethan's primary caregiver since birth. She has arranged her work and school schedules to maximize her time with her son. The apartment they share is small but adequate and located within the same school district. Most importantly, there is a strong bond between mother and child that should not be disrupted." Richard scoffed audibly, earning a sharp look from the judge. "Mr. Winters, you'll have your chance to speak," Judge Hamilton warned. When it was Richard's turn to testify, he spoke with practiced charm. "Your Honor, I love my son more than anything. I want him to have the best of everything, the best schools, the best opportunities, the best life. Martha is—" He paused, affecting a concerned expression. "Struggling. Since our divorce, she's been barely keeping it together." Martha bit her lip, fighting back tears. "To be frank," Richard continued, "Martha was overwhelmed as a mother, even when we were married. I was the one who took Ethan to doctor's appointments because she was too anxious. I was the one who had to handle school meetings because she would get flustered and emotional." His mother nodded vigorously from the gallery. Richard leaned forward. "Ethan needs stability and strength. Martha is simply too weak to be a mother." The words hit Martha like a physical blow. 2 years ago, she had been diagnosed with postpartum depression after Ethan's birth. Richard had used it against her ever since, framing her struggle as a fundamental character flaw rather than a medical condition she had successfully treated. Eleanor requested to speak, and the judge allowed it. "Your Honor," Eleanor began, her voice crisp with disapproval, I've watched Martha with my grandson for years. She coddles him excessively. The boy needs discipline and structure, not endless coddling. Just last month, when Ethan stayed with Richard for the weekend, he came home with his shoes on the wrong feet because Martha hadn't taught him properly. Martha closed her eyes briefly, remembering. Ethan had proudly put on his own shoes that morning, and though they were on the wrong feet, she had celebrated his independence. Later, she gently showed him the difference between left and right. They've always had an unusual relationship, Eleanor continued. Martha treats the boy more like a friend than a son. She's simply too immature, too emotional to provide proper guidance. Richard tells me she once cried in front of Ethan when he skinned his knee. What kind of example is that? Richard nodded solemnly. Your Honor, Martha once told me herself, I don't think I can do this. Those were her exact words when Ethan was colicky as a baby. If someone doesn't believe in themselves as a parent, how can we believe in them? Martha's attorney objected. Your Honor, these characterizations are unfair and one-sided. Every new parent has moments of doubt. Sustained, Judge Hamilton said. Mr. Winters, please stick to verifiable facts. Richard straightened his tie. The facts are simple. I earn more money. I have a larger home. I can provide Ethan with opportunities. Martha simply cannot. Private schools, summer camps, sports teams, travel, these things matter for a child's development. When it was Martha's turn to speak, her voice was quiet but steady. Your Honor, everything they've said about my financial situation is true. I don't have Richard's money or resources, but Ethan doesn't need luxury. He needs love, attention, and understanding. Richard rolled his eyes, muttering something to his attorney. When Ethan has nightmares, Martha continued, he calls for me. When he's sick, I'm the one who sits up with him all night. I know his favorite books, his fears, his dreams. I'm finishing my education to provide a better life for us, to show him the value of perseverance. Martha took a deep breath. Richard says I'm too emotional. Maybe I am. I cry when Ethan is hurt because I feel his pain. I laugh when he's happy because his joy is mine too. Richard calls that weakness. I call it love. Eleanor shook her head dismissively. Pathetic, she whispered, just loud enough for Martha to hear. Mrs. Winters, the judge addressed Eleanor sharply, another comment like that and you'll be removed from my courtroom. Richard's attorney presented photographs of his spacious home, Ethan's large bedroom filled with toys, the backyard with play equipment. Martha's attorney showed pictures of the modest apartment she shared with Ethan, his smaller but cozy room, decorated with his artwork, the community park a block away where they spent weekends. As the hearing continued, Richard grew increasingly condescending. Your Honor, he said, Martha couldn't even keep a goldfish alive when we were married. The woman killed 3 fish in a row because she forgot to feed them. How can she be trusted with a child? Martha flinched at the memory. The fish had died during her worst days of postpartum depression, when she could barely get out of bed. Richard had bought them as practice for her to prove she could handle responsibility. I think everyone in this courtroom knows, Richard continued with a smug smile, that Martha is too weak to be a mother. She's too emotional, too disorganized, and frankly, too unstable. Ethan deserves better. The judge called for a brief recess before her final decision. As they waited, Richard and Eleanor huddled with their attorney, occasionally glancing at Martha with smug expressions. Martha sat alone, her attorney having stepped out to take another call. Eleanor approached her during the break. You know you're going to lose, right? She said quietly. Richard always gets what he wants. Always. Be a good girl and don't make a scene when the judge rules in our favor. It will only upset Ethan. Martha didn't respond, keeping her eyes fixed on her hands. You know it's for the best, Eleanor continued, her voice syrupy with false concern. You've always been too weak to be a proper mother. Ethan needs a strong male influence, not some emotional wreck who can barely support herself. When court resumed, Judge Hamilton returned with a folder in her hands. Martha's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. "In the matter of custody for Ethan Winters," the judge began, "I have reviewed all testimony, evidence, and the recommendations of the child welfare officer who interviewed both parents and the child himself." Richard sat forward eagerly, already half smiling. "Mr. Winters has presented a compelling case regarding his financial stability and material resources," Judge Hamilton continued. "There is no question he can provide certain advantages." Eleanor patted Richard's hand, whispering, "See, I told you." The judge adjusted her glasses. "However, custody determinations are not made on financial grounds alone. The court must consider the child's emotional well-being, established bonds, and continuity of care." Martha held her breath. "During my review of this case, I discovered several concerning patterns," Judge Hamilton said, opening the folder on her desk. "Mr. Winters, your bank records show extensive travel during your scheduled visitation weekends when you claim to be bonding with your son. Your credit card statements show charges at resorts and hotels where children were not present." Richard's smile faltered. "Additionally," the judge continued, "the child welfare officer's interviews with Ethan revealed that during his time with you, he is primarily in the care of his grandmother or a nanny, not you personally." Eleanor's face reddened. "Most troubling," Judge Hamilton said, her voice growing stern, "are these emails submitted to the court." She held up several printed pages. "Correspondence between you and Mrs. Winters during your marriage, in which you repeatedly belittled her struggles with postpartum depression, referred to her in derogatory terms, and explicitly stated you were documenting her failures to use against her in a future custody battle." Martha stared in shock. Her sister had encouraged her to save those emails years ago, and her attorney had submitted them as evidence, but she hadn't expected the judge to find them significant. "Mr. Winters, this court does not look favorably on parents who actively undermine the other parent's relationship with their child. Your consistent pattern of denigrating Mrs. Winters, both during your marriage and throughout these proceedings, suggests you do not prioritize Ethan's emotional well-being over your own desire to win." Richard's attorney whispered urgently in his ear. "Mrs. Winters," Judge Hamilton turned to Martha, "while your financial resources are indeed more limited, you have demonstrated consistency, dedication, and a genuine understanding of your son's needs. Your educational pursuits, far from being a detriment, as Mr. Winters suggested, show commendable effort to improve your family's circumstances." Martha's hands trembled as hope bloomed in her chest. "After careful consideration of all factors, and with the primary focus being the best interests of the child," Judge Hamilton declared, "this court awards primary physical custody of Ethan Winters to Martha Winters." The room seemed to spin around Martha. She gripped the table to steady herself. "Mr. Winters will have visitation every other weekend and one evening per week," the judge continued. "Both parents will share legal custody and make major decisions jointly regarding education, healthcare, and religious upbringing." Richard stood abruptly. "This is outrageous. She manipulated you. She's always playing the victim." "Mr. Winters, control yourself," Judge Hamilton warned. "My decision is final. If you wish to appeal, you may do so through the proper channels." Eleanor was frantically whispering to the attorney, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Furthermore," the judge added, "given the evidence of Mr. Winters' attempts to alienate the child from his mother, I am ordering both parents to attend co-parenting counseling. Mr. Winters will bear the full cost of these sessions." The bailiff was instructed to bring Ethan into the courtroom. When the door opened, Martha saw her son, small and uncertain, his brown eyes wide as he scanned the room for familiar faces. "Ethan," Judge Hamilton said gently, "I've made a decision about where you'll be living. You'll be staying with your mother, and you'll visit your father regularly." Ethan's face lit up as he spotted Martha. Breaking free from the bailiff's gentle hold, he ran across the courtroom. "I want to go home with you, Mom," he cried, throwing his arms around her waist. "Can we go now?" Martha knelt down, pulling him into a proper hug, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetheart, we can go home now." Over Ethan's shoulder, she saw Richard's face contorted with fury, Eleanor clutching her pearls in shock. The woman who had called her too weak to be a mother now watched as Ethan clung to Martha, his true safe harbor. As Martha gathered her belongings, Richard approached, his voice low and threatening. "This isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll keep fighting until—" "Mr. Winters," Judge Hamilton interrupted, having overheard, "let me be perfectly clear. Continued hostility will only result in further restrictions on your visitation rights. I suggest you take this opportunity to reflect on what truly matters, your son's well-being, not your wounded pride." Richard retreated, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Outside the courthouse, autumn sunlight warmed Martha's face as she held Ethan's hand. For the first time in 18 months, she could breathe freely. "Mom, can we get ice cream?" Ethan asked, skipping beside her. "Absolutely," Martha smiled. "We have a lot to celebrate." As they walked down the courthouse steps, Martha felt something shift inside her. Not weakness breaking, but strength taking root. The strength had always been there, in every midnight feeding, every fever soothed, every tear wiped away. Not the flashy strength of Richard's bank account or Eleanor's rigid discipline, but the quiet, enduring strength of love. "Mom," Ethan said, looking up at her with serious eyes. "Grandma Eleanor said you're too weak to take care of me. But that's not true. You're the strongest person I know." Martha squeezed his hand. "Thank you, sweetheart. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is keep loving, even when it's hard. Like when I was mean about eating broccoli, but you still made me dinosaur pancakes the next morning?" Ethan asked. Martha laughed, her heart full. Exactly like that. As they reached the bottom of the steps, Martha spotted her sister Lucy waiting by her car, having come to provide moral support. Lucy's face broke into a wide smile when she saw them, and she rushed forward to embrace them both. "You did it," Lucy whispered in Martha's ear. "I knew you would." Martha just nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. She had done it, not by becoming cold and calculating like Richard, not by being rigid and controlling like Eleanor, but by staying true to herself, emotional, imperfect, and deeply loving. "Ice cream for everyone," Lucy announced, making Ethan cheer. As they drove away from the courthouse, Martha glanced back just once. Richard and Eleanor stood on the steps, watching them leave, diminishing in the distance until they were just small, angry figures far behind. Martha turned her eyes forward, toward her son, toward home, toward their future together. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Richard would likely continue to make things difficult. Money would remain tight, and balancing work, school, and motherhood would still be challenging. But for now, in this moment, Martha knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be, and exactly strong enough to be there. 3 months after the custody hearing, Martha sat at her kitchen table surrounded by textbooks. Ethan-colored dinosaurs across from her, tongue poking out in concentration. "Mom, is Dad going to be mad again when he picks me up tomorrow?" Ethan asked without looking up. Martha set down her highlighter. Richard had been consistently late for pickups, often sending Eleanor instead, and had cancelled twice at the last minute. "I'm not sure, sweetie. But remember, however Dad acts isn't because of anything you did." Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Can't make it tomorrow. Business emergency. We'll make it up to him next week." Martha sighed, knowing there would be tears when she told Ethan. This would be the third weekend in a row Richard had cancelled. "Mom, you look sad," Ethan said, putting down his crayon. "Dad has to work tomorrow, so your visit needs to be rescheduled." Ethan's face fell. "Does he not want to see me?" "Oh, honey, no." Martha knelt beside his chair. "Dad loves you very much. He's just very busy with work right now. Can we go to Jimmy's birthday party instead? He invited me, but I said no because it was Dad's weekend." Martha smiled. "Absolutely. I'll text Jimmy's mum right now." Diggy. As she reached for her phone, a sharp knock came at the door. Through the peephole, Martha saw Eleanor standing ramrod straight in the hallway. "Eleanor, this is unexpected. May I come in?" Eleanor didn't wait for an answer, brushing past Martha. Her critical gaze swept over the modest living space. "I see you're still determined to play student instead of focusing on my grandson," Eleanor said. "Ethan, can you go play in your room for a few minutes?" Once Ethan was out of earshot, Martha turned to her former mother-in-law. "What can I do for you?" "Richard sent me to inform you that he's filing an appeal of the custody decision." Martha's stomach dropped. "On what grounds?" "He's received a promotion. He'll be making twice his previous salary now. The apartment he's purchased in Beacon Hill would give Ethan access to the best private schools in Boston." Martha took a steadying breath. "Money isn't everything, Eleanor. Richard also has concerns about your relationship." "What relationship?" "Don't play coy. You've been seen with a man several times now." Martha felt heat rise to her face. She had recently reconnected with Daniel, an old friend from college who taught at a local elementary school. "My personal life is none of Richard's business, as long as Ethan is well cared for." "We have photographs," Eleanor continued. "You, this man, and Ethan together." Richard is concerned about the impact on Ethan's emotional well-being. Martha almost laughed at the absurdity. Richard is concerned, the same Richard who has cancelled 3 weekends in a row? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Richard is willing to be generous if you cooperate. He'll increase the child support, perhaps even help with your tuition. In exchange for what? Primary custody, of course. You would have liberal visitation." Martha felt a cold anger settle in her chest. "Eleanor, please leave now." "Don't be foolish. Richard always gets what he wants eventually." Martha opened the front door. "If Richard wants to discuss custody arrangements, he can do so through our attorneys or in counseling, not by sending you to intimidate me." Eleanor's face hardened. "You think you're so strong now, don't you? When Richard's finished, you won't know what hit you." After Eleanor left, Ethan peeked out from the hallway. "Is Grandma Eleanor mad at us?" Martha knelt to his level. "Grandma Eleanor and Dad are going through some difficult feelings right now, but that has nothing to do with you or me. She said Dad is going to take me away." Martha hugged him tightly. "Nobody is taking you anywhere, I promise." That night, after Ethan was asleep, Martha called her attorney who couldn't speak until Monday. On Sunday at Jimmy's birthday party, Daniel, Jimmy's teacher and Martha's new friend, sat beside her with coffee. "You seem worried," he said gently. Martha hesitated, then explained Richard's threat to appeal custody. Daniel listened thoughtfully. "My sister went through something similar. The judge saw through her ex's tactics. Courts don't easily overturn custody decisions without substantial changes in circumstances." "Richard has money and connections," Martha said quietly. "And now he's using my friendship with you against me." Daniel looked surprised. "With me? How?" "Apparently we've been photographed together with Ethan. Eleanor implied I'm exposing him to inappropriate relationships." Daniel's expression darkened. "That's ridiculous. We've had coffee a few times and went to a museum." "Welcome to Richard's world," Martha sighed. "Everything's a weapon." The following week, Martha sat in her attorney's office, a shabby space with mismatched furniture. "He doesn't have grounds for appeal," Ms. Rodriguez assured her. The promotion and new apartment aren't substantial changes. Having a friend isn't grounds for custody modification. So we don't need to worry? Ms. Rodriguez's expression grew serious. Richard has hired Blackwell and Associates, Boston's most aggressive family law firm. They'll drag this out, file motion after motion. Their strategy is to exhaust your resources. I can't compete with that, Martha whispered. There's something else. Richard has requested a psychological evaluation, citing your history of postpartum depression. Martha felt the blood drain from her face. That was years ago. I completed treatment. We'll fight it, but prepare for battle. Over the next month, Richard's tactics escalated. He showed up with expensive gifts, then told Ethan about the ski vacation and Disney trip he was planning. He requested visitation changes that conflicted with Martha's classes, then documented every accommodation she requested. The psychological evaluation was grueling. 8 hours of invasive questions. The psychologist gave no indication of his conclusions. Eleanor launched a charm offensive at Ethan's school, donating playground equipment and mentioning Richard's generous donations whenever Martha was nearby. The final blow came when Martha's financial aid was unexpectedly denied. Without it, she couldn't continue her education. That evening, while Ethan was with Richard, Martha's sister Lucy called. "He's playing dirty," Lucy said, "but so can we." "What do you mean?" "Remember Dad's friend, James Sullivan, the investigative journalist? He's interested in Blackwell and Associates' questionable tactics and those emergency business trips Richard keeps cancelling visitation for. They coincide with visits to an expensive escort service." Martha gasped. "How do you know that?" "I did some digging. James can do more. Richard's company is under SEC investigation too." The next day, Richard called for a meeting. At a coffee shop, he looked tired. "I'm dropping the appeal," he said. "We'll keep the current arrangement." "Why the sudden change?" "I've been advised it isn't in anyone's best interest." "And the financial aid interference?" "I'll make some calls. It was a mistake." "And the psychological evaluation? My attorney will withdraw the request." Martha nodded. "I want everything in writing. And one more thing, regular, consistent visitation. No more cancellations. Ethan needs his father." Something shifted in Richard's expression. "I'm not good at this," he admitted quietly. "The day-to-day stuff. You always were." "You could be," Martha said. "Ethan adores you. He just needs to know he can count on you." 2 weeks later, Richard's appeal was withdrawn. Martha's financial aid was reinstated. That evening, as Ethan packed for his weekend with Richard, he asked, "Are you and Dad friends now?" "We're trying to be better at being your parents together, even though we live apart." Ethan nodded. "Grandma Eleanor said you were too weak to fight Dad, but you're not weak. You're like the superheroes that never give up." The doorbell rang. Richard, on time. He stood with a small bouquet. "A peace offering," he said. Martha accepted them with surprise. "Thank you." "I've rearranged my schedule to make our weekends work," he said. As Richard helped Ethan with his backpack, Martha caught Eleanor watching from the car. Martha gave her a small nod. Not peace, but perhaps understanding. After they left, Martha placed the flowers in water. On her refrigerator, Ethan's latest drawing showed 3 figures. A small boy between a woman and a man, all holding hands. Martha traced the figures, remembering Eleanor's words. "You're too weak to be a mother." Those words no longer had power. In their place was certainty that strength comes in many forms, sometimes in fighting, sometimes in forgiveness, but always in love. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard, a photo of Ethan grinning, captioned, "Weekend adventures begin." Martha smiled. Not perfect, but progress. Later that week, Martha completed her final exam with confidence. Outside, Daniel waited with coffee. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Really well," she smiled. "I think I aced it." As they walked in the sunshine, Martha felt a sense of peace. She had been called weak for her emotions, her struggles, her determination to prioritize love over power. But those very qualities had been her strength all along. The custody battle had taught her that true strength wasn't about money or status or winning at all costs. It was about standing firm for what matters, about vulnerability and resilience, about putting Ethan's needs above her own wounded pride. In the end, she hadn't just won custody. She'd won something far more valuable: the knowledge that she was exactly the mother Ethan needed, emotional and imperfect and fiercely loving. The woman once told she was too weak to be a mother, now walked with quiet confidence, heading toward a future bright with possibility. Not because she had defeated her enemies, but because she had remained true to herself through every battle. And that was the greatest victory of all.